how did you get to New York City?
Well, I am a bridge and tunnel girl. I grew up in New Jersey, and I went to school in Virginia, but New York was always the city. I'm from North Jersey, so it's kind of like, I feel like if you're from Central or South, oftentimes the closest city is Philly. But for me, it was always like New York is it. There's no other city. So I think I went to school in the DMV area, and for a while I considered like going to Washington, D.C. because I was also considering going into like politics.
Whoa.
But I was always like, I think by the time I was a senior, I was like, I've got to get back to New York. I really think that's just like the only place for me. And I feel like it still is. Like, I mean, I feel like that's a horrible personality trait to have, but I'm kind of just like, I don't know. I couldn't really see myself anywhere but here.
Was comedy always on your roadmap?
Absolutely not.
How did that happen?
I think I always describe myself as a reformed theater kid. I grew up performing. I really did speech and debate. Like I went to college on a like speech and debate, otherwise known as like forensic scholarship.
Whoa.
Yeah. To one of like at the time, one of like the top college forensics programs in the country. And so I was performing in a way because there are like interpretation events in addition to public address events. And I think when I graduated, I just came to New York to be a normal person. I thought I was going to go into like nonprofit or education, if not government. And I just missed being creative. I missed performing. And so I just started taking improv classes because that was something I felt weird about. I always thought of myself as like, as a teen, I was always like a serious actor. You know what I mean? I had like no idea what I was doing, but I always wanted to just like, I think I was scared to put myself out there and be funny, even though I was voted like best sense of humor. You know what I mean? Like I was class clown, but I was like, I think I was too scared to be vulnerable in a way where it was like, oh, I'm trying to be funny. You know what I mean? As a performer, as an actor. Really, I actually should have gone to school for acting. Looking back, but I think I was always too scared to admit that was what I liked doing. I think that, so I came back, I started doing improv classes, and then I got roped into an indie improv team, and then I got roped into doing sketch comedy, and then I kind of just fell in love with that. It was like a good marriage of like comedy and then like kind of like math or like very structured writing in a way, which is what you do in speech and debate a lot. And so I fell in love with that, and then kind of just like followed everything, and now I'm kind of just like where a lot of other comedians are, which is just like, I guess, trying to be an actor and or a writer wherever anyone will hire me, and like performing randomly. And I lost my job in December, like my 9 to 5, because I was like truly doing like career path riding both rails for a while, and I was gonna like, I'll just keep doing this until I can't anymore. And then in December, when I was told that my position was being eliminated, I was just like, this is the universe telling me to go full creative. This is what I've been wanting to do, and so I need to just do it, even though it's really freaking scary. But a lot of people get laid off, and I am lucky enough to have options and like skills to fall back on. And not that, you know, everyone that gets laid off doesn't have skills, but like things that I could, you know, I started teaching at the theater. I started directing at the theater. So I'm lucky to fall into streams of income that are like still working the muscles that I want to be working every day. And like, you know, I don't live alone, and my partner has like a stable job and stuff. So it was kind of just like, yeah, I'll just do it and go full comedy mode. And I'm 7 months into it, and we're seeing what happens.
You said you got a speech and debate scholarship?
Yes.
And in a forensic lane? Did I hear that correctly?
Okay, so
what does that mean?
forensics is like basically like the Greek word for like oratory.
I see.
Yeah. So it's not like CSI. But I just call it speech and debate because it's easier for people to picture what that is in both the high school and like collegiate setting. So
how does one go about getting a scholarship in speech and debate to college? How did that take place?
Yeah, that's a long ass story. I think the scene is it's very niche in high school, but like I went to the college that I ended up going to. Ran like a summer institute for kids that were serious about forensics. And so I went there in the summer and kind of, got scouted by them through that because I was also performing through the work that I was doing at that institute that prepped me for that season. I was performing well on the national circuit. So it was like I was competing at nationals, all kind of like a lot of Ivy League schools have speech and debate. I was placing there. And so they scouted me and then recruited me to go to that school. Yeah.
And you're debating mostly like themes or topics or?
So I was mostly on the interp and oratory side. So it's like as opposed to debate, which I dabbled in, I was doing mostly like interp events are like you cut up a play and perform it alone for 10 minutes, or you can or you cut up like a piece of prose, or you put together a bunch of like poetry. There's a bunch of different interpretation events in that way. But then there's public address events, which is like you truly write a speech. In high school, that's just called original oratory. In college, there's different categories of that, like persuasion, communication analysis, informative, and after dinner speaking, which is basically like the funny version of any of those types of speech types. So in college, I fell in love with public address, but I was predominantly interp in high school.
That, I would imagine, is often a very serious world of analysis and eloquence, and not necessarily comedic, but I could be wrong about that. Was comedy permitted? Was that
permitted? They were like, no.
When you look back on your trajectory, like, how does that experience at all map onto what you're doing now?
I think it's a huge influence. I think like if you were to ask like any other if you were to ask people like what my sort of like comedic voice is that it's just like I blend smart and stupid. And I feel like that is like, maybe a little bit trite and maybe not unique, and that's something I need to reflect on. But I think I love one of my like the great joys in life to me is presenting very stupid ideas very silly with deeply formal language, as if it is like a topic that we need to be paying attention to. Like I have a friend, Jamie, who is on my team at UCB, and when we were talking about my voice, she was like, "You could write the formula for a pussy joke." I really love having fun with language, and like some people, like you've spoken to Nick, right? Like Nick is an amazing joke writer, but he also is like his physicality is obviously something that like comes through. I think he's one of the greatest physical comedians alive today. But I think, but for me, like I'm very verbal. Like my jokes are written like very intentionally, and so I think that I talk about really stupid stuff or really silly ideas with very formal language. And I think that comes from like speech writing or it's because it's also kind of like a world that's very like, it's very niche, like I said, but it's very like up its own ass. Like it's very just like, talking about like political ideas and advocacy work and, like, the human condition, you know what I mean? It's like it's so formal. Everyone's in suits and we're taking it so seriously. Yeah. And I did take it seriously for so long. I thought it was the be all end all. It was the reason I could afford to go to college and graduate with minimal debt. Like it was a huge part of my life. And like, I did take it so seriously as teenagers and young adults are kind of like, want to do, you know what I mean? Like I thought it was the most important thing, and there is amazing work. Like some people like, they with persuasion, they like explore like really important topics like, I remember when I was there, someone won the national championship with a speech on like sexual abuse of like migrant workers, and it was like and the persuasion category, like you're supposed to come up with solutions and like ways to ways to act. And so it's just kind of like you're constantly exposed to like important ideas. And it's like it was great, like to grow up as a young adult to constantly live in that world.
Yeah.
But now it's like very fun to see very silly things like approached with that kind of formality is like very, very fun to me. Yeah.
Did you get to a point where the earnestness and the seriousness and the stiffness of that world started to wear on you, where you kind of had an intuition like, I need to do something that's a little more light and funny and maybe is not so serious as what you had been doing?
Yeah, maybe not necessarily in terms of like performance, but or what I was doing, but or like the work I was putting forward, but I think more so like interpersonally, and like on a personal level. Like I think like one of my greatest obstacles as an artist is taking myself too seriously. I think that is something that I'm like constantly, because I think a big part of being a comedian or an actor is really just like the ability to make big choices and come from a place of like unmitigated joy and and that when you're like scared to be vulnerable or scared to look stupid or look like a clown is like a huge inhibitor. And so I think like the need to be perceived as perfect or the smartest person in the room or the most eloquent person in the room, I think is comedically like a big inhibitor. Like I remember when I did the comedic event, like public address event, which is called After Dinner Speaking. It was like very difficult for me to write jokes or to not take myself seriously because I was kind of just like, well, I think I'm just like doing this event to like because I know I'm funny and I feel like it should be the good thing. It's the right thing to do. Whereas now, if I would approach that event, I would be like, this is heaven on earth. You know what I mean? Like I get to explore an idea I'm excited about, and like write a formal speech about it that could have an impact on someone while also just writing a ton of jokes. Like that feels like heaven. But I think at the time when I was like a 19-year-old or like, I was just kind of like, this is just something that I'm like doing to like, grow my range as opposed to
your focus.
This is like a true like art form.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think interpersonally, yeah. I also just think that like when you go to one of those programs, when you go to into one of those programs as a young adult, it's often like we were like kind of like athletes where it was just like I went to classes, but then on the weekends we were competing and like, you're in this environment that's like that's very serious and you're answering to, a director that's like a very well respected like professor. And so it was like it was very intense interpersonally and very serious, and you got your worth from this very insular niche world that is like very detached from the outside, right? Which I think is similar like to any niche program, like for athletes or like for people maybe like in a theater program. It's like it's difficult to kind of touch grass a lot of the time, and so like and you take yourself seriously in this way by these standards or metrics that everybody else in the world isn't. And so like I think on a personal level it was inhibiting, but like I am so thankful that I developed those skills and that they informed my comedic voice because I do think it's sort of unique,
absolutely,
and a niche experience, but I think it allowed me to explore comedy from a really specific angle and come to it organically, which is nice. Like I don't identify, like so many people around me are like comedy nerds where it's just like they could tell you who the musical guest on any episode of SNL was, and like they're telling me all these sketches. I'm kind of like that. I was never a scholar of those things. You know what I mean? And like obviously I have my favorite like artists and comedians now, but like I was just like never a nerd about those things. So it's like kind of nice to come to it from an external lens where it's kind of just like I kind of see this as like a science a little bit, or like a style of performance that is like really fun and I find the most fulfilling, but I'm not coming from it from like a really interior view, which is a detriment sometimes, but then other times I'm really happy I come to it from an external point of view.
I'm sure it gives you a unique skill set in certain circumstances to be able to have that.
I like to think so. But sometimes I just wish I was like knew all the references or like looked at sketch completely like a math problem, where for me, I guess I do view it like a math problem, but I do view it more as like a speech, I think, a lot of the time in terms of structure. But so far that's helped me, I guess, depending at like if you view what I do as any sort of accomplishment.
You said earlier that at one point you were interested in going into politics.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration there? What did you want to do?
I think I wanted to be a speechwriter. Yeah, I think oratory is like when I was always interested in history and politics, and I was lucky enough to study in the UK for a little bit, and like oratory is like, and debate is a huge part of the tradition. They at least at the school where I was, studying and in the UK, and like I think like just it's just such a touchstone for these huge flashpoints in history. Like I was such an A-push head in school that it was just kind of like, I mean, before everything became decentralized via the internet, it was kind of just like, if you were moved by a presidential candidate, that could change the trajectory of an election, which therefore changed, the course of history. And same with propaganda, you know what I mean? It's kind of just like there are so many things that are spun like in American history that solidifies our place in the world for better or for worse. That I at least, at best find it interesting, at worst find it deeply demoralizing, at least in American history. But like I've always been so moved by oratory. And I think like I wanted to be a speechwriter. I also really, really believe that, people say this all the time, so this might sound trite, but I actually truly believe that like politics is showbiz for ugly people. And like I think that's especially true now if you look at who's like in our government and how personalized and individualized electoral politics has become. Like we are so focused on the individual and the branding of that individual and the character of that individual, as opposed to like the policies that they're bringing forward, even for like political candidates that I support, you know what I mean? I'm really worried about the left's obsession with Zoran, even though I volunteer for him and I believe in a lot of the things that he's putting forward. I'm kind of just like, we need to stop like talking about this person as an individual and focus on collective action. You know what I mean? But I don't know what I was talking about. But like I think like I was always like very moved by that, by oratory, but then like became very disillusioned with politics and government when I started volunteering more in DC and getting into it. And I just was like, okay, I'd rather just like be in nonprofit or education if I feel like I need to be making a difference. But I think I say that now I've found my way back to showbiz. Because I discovered I wasn't ugly, but I'm just kidding. But because like you have those same instincts of like creating communion or having an impact on a large group of people, you know what I mean? And there is some ego and like some narcissism to it. But I felt like I felt like showbiz felt like a more benign and use of my ability than government or politics.
Yeah. I'd love to get back into the trajectory to you getting into comedy full time to this point. How did you get into UCB? What are the steps that led you there?
Yeah. I mean, when I moved back here, I was like, I miss being creative. That was such a big part of being in college speech and debate. And I was like, I'm going to take improv classes because I really needed to get out of my shell and I wanted to push myself because improv, when I did theater like in high school and stuff, was always something I was like, I hate this. I hate trying to be funny because I hated vulnerability. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. And then I got roped into being in indie improv teams. Indie just means like, not associated with the theater. Then got roped into sketch and kind of fell in love with that. And I think because of the speech and debate world, I love institutions. I love structure. So I was like, okay, I guess then everyone was always talking about auditioning for improv teams and all that stuff. But improv didn't feel as fun to me as sketch did. I think because I am like such a writer-brained person that sketch felt more fun. And so I was like, oh, I'll audition for, the Maud Teams, which is the sketch program in 2019. And I auditioned and got on, and then we did 2 shows, and then the theater closed. And then I pivoted into character work just because it's all the same. It's just one person sketch. And characters is easier to do in a pandemic than sketch because you don't have to talk to anyone, and it's easier to put up online. And so then I got into that world. And then when the theater reopened, I was like, I'm going to audition for did both programs for a year. And now I'm a director on Maud. I direct a sketch team, and now I'm a performer on Betty. So it feels like I've been at the theater for all of those 5 years, but in reality, I've only been associated fully with it for the past 2 years since it's reopened, but I've been so immersed that it feels like I've been associated with it. But the beauty of the theater is the people, is the community. So I was like, I had been working with those same people throughout the pandemic when there wasn't a theater. I feel like it still existed, just in this nebulous form through the community. And so that's probably why too. But yeah, I love institutions. Any sort of linear growth path I can link onto, which is so antithetical to art and entertainment and comedy. I'm kind of just I'm there, baby.
Tell me about the audition process to actually get on to one of those teams. How do they do it? How does it work? What do you remember about actually getting on?
How the sausage gets made. So I think they follow the same structure. I don't know if this will change, you know what I mean? As they grow after the reopening, but usually it's a 3-minute character set. This is for Maud. So it's it's 2 rounds. So it's usually, at least when I first auditioned in 2019, it was you submitted a reel if they liked your reel. So it was just 5 minutes of filmed character work.
Yeah.
That's the same thing as if you were submitting for Just for Laughs Festival or Saturday Night Live. If they like your reel, they'll ask you to come do a live audition. You do 3 minutes I think back then it was 5 minutes. I don't know how, maybe because they had that preliminary round of characters. So your objective there is to show range. So it's for Maud, for sketch, you can perform characters that you didn't write yourself, but you have to say that someone else wrote it. So you perform 5 minutes of that. If you get through that round, then you're assigned 2 scripts. In one sketch, you're the voice of reason in a sketch, and in one, you're the unusual person, which is very UCB, very game based, or very UCB game based theory. Rest in power, Del Close. I almost said Glenn Close. But yeah, so it's very UCB theory based sketch. And it's usually a 2-hander. And then you go into the audition, you meet your partner that day, you perform those 2 sketches back to back. And that's the final round. And then they put people onto teams. So yeah, I was very fortunate in 2019. And some people audition over and over and over again. And I was very lucky to be yeah, I'll do this. And then was lucky enough to get on my first time. So, but I also like tasks, so I liked analyzing and each portion of the audition and being okay, what do I think they want, and then going for it there. And then now in what they do at the theater currently, or at least when I auditioned in 2023 before we reopened in 2024, was they can join Betty and Maud audition. So it's if you do your 3-minute character set, and then if you want to be considered for Maud, you say that, and then you'll get brought in to do the scenes round. But if you just want to audition for Betty, you rely on that 3-minute set that you did initially. So I was lucky enough to be of a few people when the theater reopened that they put in both programs. And they don't really do that anymore after 1 year, I think, just to get as much talent in the theater as possible. But I stepped down from Maud to direct, but I stayed on Betty, which is the character program.
Okay. We talked a little bit offline before we started recording about the finances, the financial reality of doing work at UCB and for people in that world in general. And I made a comment to you that I had never talked directly with people in the improv world at the UCB world about what that reality is. I'd love for you to share, if you're comfortable, any of the details of what that reality really looks like, at least at present, for people who are performing there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I can say, and but I also don't want to be like, this is just my experience as a performer at the theater. Like, in terms of payment. I have no value judgments on this at all. This is just like the reality of it. So UCB, I don't know if how many other theaters do this, but I know it wasn't always this way, is committed to paying performers. However, in order to pay the performers, there first needs to be a recoupment from the theater so that we can pay our amazing tech staff, so that we can pay the house staff. And I don't know where the rest of the money goes, but there's a set amount of recoupment from the theater. Totally makes sense. In order for that recoupment to not be the total of what that show made, you need to get really close to selling out, if not sell out. Because of like the affordability of the tickets, which is something that I believe in, because we need to have access to comedy and art. And that is very difficult to sell out the theater. It's like well over 100 seats. If you're putting up a show monthly, it's like difficult to get people to come. So it's like as a and then you're splitting that. Sorry, after the recruitment, let's say you sell out after the recruitment, whatever that amount of money is left is split among everybody on that show.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're on a mod show, that means that you are on that show with 23 other people, because a mod team is 12 people. It's 6 writers and 6 performers. If you're on a Betty team, that's 10 people. So it's like, so the theater takes their chunk and then it's split with everybody else. So you really can't go in expecting to make a significant amount of your monthly income if you're putting up a show monthly, which is the pattern for sketch and character teams. So I've never, like, we're all technically like employees of the theater, right? Like they have our W-9s, but like, but I never go in assuming that this is going to be a big part of my income at all. We all work other jobs.
How do people survive?
We work gig jobs. Some people have full-time 9-to-5 jobs. That was me for a while. Because luckily, like most people, most teams, like we rehearse at night, and then and our shows are always at 7 p.m. So we, are able to work that 9-to-5 life. But like right now, I'm a director at the theater, I'm a teacher at the theater, and then I do like independent copywriting, acting, writing gigs, and piece together not even half of what I was making in my 9-to-5 career. But yeah, we survive off of like truly other work where we can get it. And like, I think that is like a common misunderstanding that people have, that like across art and across comedy, that it's kind of just like, that we don't get paid to put forward our work. And oftentimes we lose money on rehearsal space, on costumes, on the theater now pays directors, which is amazing, because when I was on a team in 2019, we paid our director for their time. But it was required to have a director. So like, a lot of, I know on Betty, like a lot of the character program, a lot of the time, like depending on how much tech or costuming we have, a lot of the times we lose money putting up our work, but we do it because we love it. And we love being at the theater because it is such an amazing platform. But very few of us go in with the expectation that we will make a profit or like a livable wage off of what we're doing at the theater.
I'd love to go into something you just mentioned, which is given that reality, how do you explain why so many people are willing to do this or want to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like any other passion. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like that. If that's where you get most of your fulfillment, and if that brings you to life, like I think I only very recently, especially after, I lost my job, I was like, this is the only thing that makes me feel like me and like makes me feel alive. I could have an amazing day at work, you know what I mean, where I got a lot of stuff done and I killed it at the meeting, and I was like, that this is not getting me anywhere. And I was like, you know, even if it's like mission driven work too, it's kind of just like, this is not something where I feel like I'm doing what I'm really good at or like what makes me feel, you know, alive. This is not forwarding me towards a life that I want. And so, like, to me, it was like I made a choice, but I think a lot of people have just like always known that performing or writing or creativity was what we wanted to do. I think it actually makes me think, because I think like a lot of people, and this is, you know, this is kind of just like the insane people online, but like think that everybody who's like a comedian or an artist or whatever who's putting stuff out online and, you know, promoting themselves or like putting their work out there is fame hungry. And that's just not true, because a lot of people just want to make their work. You know what I mean? They don't necessarily need to be recognized. The reason you need quote unquote fame or an audience is because we live and we work in an attention economy. And so like a lot of the times in the industry, it's kind of just like, how many followers do you have? That will get you brand deals, even if you don't want to make ads. You know what I mean? Or like that is like, or people will pay you to, you know, write copy for for things like on other accounts or XYZ. And so it's kind of like that number, that metric, at least online, shows that you have a built-in audience, and like then people can make money off of you, right? So it's kind of like then you can make a steady income. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, and that becomes a metric for it's like, oh, this person clearly is good at writing and generating comedy that people like to a certain extent, where it's like, okay, maybe we bring them into this writer's room, or maybe that we cast them in this thing because there's a number associated with them, and that is how you can get steady income. So it's kind of just like, you know, I'm not speaking for everybody. I don't think people that like do brand deals are hacks by any stretch of the imagination, but I think like to layman, I think it's like it's easy to be like, oh, everybody who is like doing art or like doing comedy is chasing fame, when in a lot of the times just like the economics of it and the industry of it all means that like we have to have an audience in order to make a livable wage creating in some way, if that makes sense.
I would also think, I don't know if this is in part what you meant by what you just said, is that people that in the spirit of creatives not necessarily seeking fame, but still putting a lot of content out into the world, it's almost like they can't help themselves. Like they just have this compulsion to do the thing. To your point, it really helps economically if you're putting that thing out there for the world to consume, which then may create the cycle of an audience where you can profit from that in some small or reasonable way.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously am not speaking for all artists. I'm sure for some people it is a compulsion.
Yeah.
I think like my dream, like other than like, you know, potentially being like in a writer's room on like a television show or something, or like cast in something, where it's like, oh, I get to go to set every day, or I get to go like be in a room full of people like, you know, writing a show every day, which is like the dream. I think, what was I going to say? Other than that, I feel like my maybe ideal life, it looks similar to more like an author, you know what I mean? Or because I'm talking about comedy or whatever, like I don't know what it's like to be like in literature, but it's just kind of like I have an amazing idea that I really want to work on. I get to pour my whole heart into it, and then we make it and we see what happens, without having to like constantly generate and put out content to like maintain some type of audience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that would be the dream. You know what I mean? Because people believe in your work or believe in your talent enough that it's like, okay, we'll do like a marketing campaign or like whatever behind this project. I'm sure that some people have the compulsion, but I think that content creation online is so admirable, and it's a completely different skill than like what a lot of people are doing at the theater.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's kind of like you work on something for a month and then you put it up, and then you could put it online, or you could put it up at other theaters, but it's just kind of like it's these different like cycles of work or types of work that are going on, and not all of them are profitable, and and they can all lead to different things. And they're all kind of like part of the economy of it all. You kind of have to choose where you want to invest your time, and like what could potentially get you to wherever you want to go in entertainment. Or there are plenty of people at the theater who like have whole other lives, and like this just gives them life, and they just want to do that and then go home to their kids, which is awesome too. But yeah, I think that's like in the fame or like constant creation and of it all is something that I think is a common unfair misconception for a lot of people.
I don't know how much you and your team members talk about this, but do you tend to find, if this is knowledge that you feel like you've settled on, that there's a certain threshold of an audience required online in order to begin to get the kind of promotional deals or revenue stream that may actually make a difference in somebody's life?
Yeah, I've heard tell that once you get to 20K, the algorithm likes you more, and brands will pay more attention to you, or at least they'll like send you free stuff. I've had some brands send me free stuff, and I'm not there yet. But yeah, I think it's like the larger your audience, it's kind of just like the more likely, the more reach you have, the more people like, and just the more eyes you have on you, you know, the more likely you are to be reached out to, either for creative opportunities or for people who say, like, from what I understand, and like anyone listening who has like a better understanding of like online marketing or like any of this, you know, could be like shaking their fist at the sky. 'Cause I'm not saying anything right, but like if you have, you know, a certain amount of eyes or reach consistently, people really like brands really like user generated content or more genuine seeming stuff that doesn't seem like a hashtag ad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or in your face. And so like it's normal for people to go to like comedian creators to be like, you know, talk about this candy bar, or like talk about this drink in like either a funny way or like or in a way that makes it seem like it's just part of your life. And then you'll have, you know, if you have 100,000 followers, that's great versus someone who has 15K.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like that. And this is all from just like my own experience, and then from my fellow comedians, both with the theater and not, who are like in the online space and trying to make money off of that.
Yeah.
All of us have other jobs, though.
Yeah. Yeah. But in your experience where this has happened with you, when you say people send you stuff, the idea is they send you swag, or they send you material and in the hope that you will promote that online, or it's attached with, hey, if you do a promotional piece for this, if you like what we're sending you, we'll pay you X amount of money.
It's different. It looks differently. I was sent stuff because I had a series of genuine food reviews. Like I had a viral series of like I ranked every jam in the Bon Moment advent calendar, and that went big. So I just was following it up with like other reviews of stuff. And it's hard. I can't really do that series as much anymore because I can't afford to buy a ton of food and then review it. That was when I had a 9-to-5 job. And I'm sure some of the people who followed me for that content are really pissed about it. But I had like a couple brands be like, will you review our stuff? And I was like, yeah, sure. And like they didn't, and I didn't get paid for that, but they sent that to me, and I was like, okay, great. I don't have to buy it. You know what I mean? But then there are other brands that reach out to, like, there are other brands that are like, hey, will you just like make a video for us and it lives on your page? And then I'll send them my rate, and some people are like, that's way too much for a video, and I'll be like, well, that's the amount if you want me to like do a certain amount of like edits or whatever. But navigating that is really hard. And it's kind of, and it feels like, and I'm really going off of the advice of a lot of like my fellow comedians and stuff, or people who have more experience getting like paid for brand work, just because like I don't have a huge following and I'm like new to all of that and new to being dependent on it and to whatever scale I am now. But yeah, I mean, a lot of this, it's sometimes it's like Fiverr, where it's like sometimes it's just like a race to the bottom in terms of rates, and like people will just go to whoever they can pay the least amount of money to like create stuff for them.
Yeah.
So it's like it's very interesting, and I'm not an expert on it at all. And I'm sure that it doesn't feel as creatives, it's not like the ideal form, but it's like of like what we make, you know what I mean? But it's but you know, it's worth it to pay the bills and stuff.
Do you find
and I'm
that
sure some of it's really fun
for most of the artists and I think you may have already said this, it is a conscious goal of theirs to get to, for example, like a 20K mark of followership in order to begin to be able to supplement their income with opportunities that may come their way, that's a stated there goal that they're working towards, or not necessarily?
I don't know. I've heard tell.
Yeah.
There are probably the majority of comedians who, if they could never tweet, if they could never post, if they could never have to do any of that they would do that. You know what I mean? I think like creating content is its own skill set, other than like what a lot of people really want to be doing.
Yeah.
But like, I think it's just kind of, I don't know a ton of the metrics, but it is kind of just like the more followers you have, the more likely you are to get paid opportunities.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's just the economy like we lived in. Like, I mean, like everything online now, I think even from just like, you know, a civilian point of view, is advertising. You know what I mean? So it's kind of just like, that is like a form of like, that is like a way to like income for people who find themselves as content creators, right? If you have a podcast, it's kind of just like, are you doing the Patreon model where it's, you know what I mean, where it's direct to consumer, or are you like getting paid by advertisers while getting to do your work?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of just like, I don't know what the number is. Like if it's, I've truly just been like, oh, 20K is like, if you want to grow in the online space, 20K is like a great goal to get to. You know what I mean? Just in terms of vanity metrics, like having above 10K when someone goes to your profile is like impressive, and that does whatever it does psychologically to either an audience member who's considering following you or a manager in the industry or whatever. You know what I mean? I think the general rule is the more the merrier, and the more you're likely to like be offered paid opportunities, because it's like you have this built-in audience. So whether it's an advertiser or an entertainment executive, I think that's just like the rule of thumb. But like, I don't think, by no means do I want to say that every comedian wants to have a huge following and wants to be big online. I think it's like two different things. I think that just a lot of us find ourselves in that place.
Given that it's almost certainly true that nearly all, if not all, comedians would rather, in an ideal world, not be spending their time and energy doing this sort of work, where do you come down on the Instagram phenomenon of modern life? Do you think for creatives, it's on balance a positive or not?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, it's hard to say. Also, like, I love that this is like a huge question of my episode, because I don't feel like an expert on it at all. It's just like a new environment that I found myself in, I think. Like trying to figure out, you know, how to piece together a living and stuff. And having like generated the largest following I've ever had, you know what I mean? Which is not big at all in the grand scheme of things. I am not saying that, but just like kind of like finding myself in this environment and feeling and being made to feel like it's kind of like vital. I don't. I can't say if most people would not want to do it. I don't know. I just think it's kind of just like, is this something that like you feel like your skill sets can be set to, and aligns with your values enough that you are like willing to make money off of it?
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Or like, I think for some people it's probably like, I think for some people who like love engaging with fans and community in that way and are like, you know, so comfortable being themselves and just like talk to like make their art, talk to people and like enjoy that online space. You know what I mean? I'm sure it's like amazing. You know what I mean? But I think but I'm sure for some comedians they're kind of like, I just kind of like want to work on the stuff that I want to work on and put out the art that I want to make at the pace that feels healthy and I want to make it.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't fit into sort of like what you need to do as a content creator to like generate a huge audience. You know what I mean? I'm sure like there are so many artists that are like, I want to write a play and then I want to be able to put it up at a theater I love and I want it to be able to sell out every night. But sometimes it's like, in today's world, you got to engage with the online, with like, you know, with the Instagram and the TikTok of it all to make that former part a reality. You know what I mean? It's a huge part of marketing. You know, back in the day we had book parties, but like, we're not all Carrie Bradshaw or Bret Easton Ellis. You know, thank God.
I'd love to go back to your work in character specifically and what it is about that world that, if it does, which I imagine it has for you, what about it resonates as like something that really fits you particularly well?
Well, probably first and foremost, my inherent discomfort of being myself on stage, which stems from probably like deep-seated self-hatred, which you'll find in many comedians. But yeah, I think about this a lot. Like I gravitate, like why I didn't really love stand-up, and because I've obviously done that. Like I think a lot of comedians have just like at least dabbled in it, just at least to get stage time or something. But I really love finding I also find that I improvise from a character perspective a lot, like more comfortably, like when I know who this person is, what their point of view is, and like whatever their vocal or physicality is, like it's more fun for me to operate from that standpoint when improvising, as opposed to, you know, going on stage and figuring out what's funny with a scene partner and kind of just like adapting in that way. But like, I think it's fun to explore I find it to be the most like urgent, immediate, and like fun, immersive way to explore an idea is by being like a person that embodies that perspective, right? So it's just like I really like trope characters. Like I have a character that's the woman in the way of your parents getting back together, which is this kind of like Meredith Blake from Parent Trap. You know, this kind of like waspy, evil blonde woman, you know what I mean? That's seduced your father, you know what I mean? And is mean and mean, rich, and like sexual in an inappropriate way, you know what I mean? Whereas like your mom's really down to earth, and wears denim shirts. But I think so it's just kind of like, I think being that person and then like being able to make jokes about like what their life is like or what their perspective is on certain things, and like reducing that big trope down to these like comedic ideas and delivering that as dialogue is very fun and like and very silly. Or I have another character that's like white male seeking Asian female, which is like this funny like sort of distinctly American archetype of like a deeply emasculated man who has like but still ascribes to all of, like the hyper masculine American values. But that idea, like I wrote a paper on yellow fever in college because like for listeners, I'm half Chinese. And of the fetishization of like Asian women and stuff, and so that is an idea that I have explored academically and like intellectually, and like, and I even did a speech on it or a piece on it when I was doing forensics, and it was just so fun to make fun of those ideas because they're inherently absurd a lot of the time of like of what a lot of people, the idea that a lot of people have of Asian women as this monolith and like why they want to date them. It's so informed. Obviously, you know, listeners are falling asleep by like imperialism, colonialism, like and like American masculinity, all that stuff. But it's just kind of like the simplicity of those ideas being linked to like our being linked to those big ideas, like. The simplicity is that we all know this guy. Like a lot of Asian women know this guy that like has approached them. You know what I mean? Or like we've seen him in culture. And so like that is so fun to me of being able to distill these larger ideas down to punchlines. Is really, really fun. And that's what a lot of jokes jokes are, right? Is just like distilling something down to like a simple statement. I find that to be a fun thing. And at the end of the day, I do love acting. Like I do love embodying different characters. And so I think that's just how I fell into that. And I think when I started at UCB as a sketch actor and like there's so many incredible writers but I think at the end of the day, I am a control freak and I like writing the jokes that I want to say and exploring the ideas that I want to explore so that I can perform them. I'm going to do Ask Sketch, which is like sort of the flagship sketch show at the theater. And it's amazing. I'm an actor and like everyone is writing, but it's just so funny because I'm pitching these ideas and the writers are like texting me about this script. And I'm like, should I have just done this as a character? You know what I mean? Even though they're handing me like an amazing sketch, I'm just kind of just like, but there is a part of me that's just like, ooh, I wish I had full control over this. You know what I mean? That instinct. So I think it's like, it's a couple things. It's like, I think it is compelling to explore an idea from a certain POV that like embodies that idea. I love acting, and then I'm a control freak, so I want to write. I want to write for myself. Yeah, a couple things going on there.
As a longtime comedy fan myself, I think as I have thought about why I have moved so much of my own time into seeking out venues like the one where you work at is the link so often between great writing in comedy and nuanced truth about the absurdity of the world.
Yeah.
And you used to, and it sounds like spend a lot of your time in the world of oratory and speech and debate.
Yeah.
And people who are great at that are often giving speeches trying to persuade people of what is true in their rhetoric. I don't know if you've thought a lot about this, but in your mind, is there more truth being told in great comedy than you remember seeing in the world of academic speech and debate? Or is it really more just the absurdity and silliness that you see in the world that you inhabit now?
Well, I'm about to tell everybody what the truth is. I think that it's funny because Al Franken, may he rest in peace, once said on the floor of Congress, he was like, because he was a writer at SNL before he was a member of Congress, and he said, my job used to be to identify absurdity. Because jokes are identifying the absurd thing, right? Or just like jokes. I remember if you've ever taken AP Lang or in composition, it's like irony as a literary device is truly just a subversion of expectation, right? Yeah. So it's like it's noting the absurd thing, or like, and which means acknowledging the expectation on a personal or societal level, like that we have, right? Which sometimes is inherently absurd, right? So I think in politics, it's kind of just like everybody has their own agenda. And like, of course, when you're writing from a subjective place, everybody kind of has like their own agenda. But I think like sometimes the way I'll answer it is like, sometimes I think that there are more useful truths in comedy because by subverting and revealing an expectation that we all have, we kind of have to examine that expectation. Yeah. Right? I often, like a theory that I learned when I was like in, you know, a practicum or whatever in speech and debate is like, that we laugh to correct, right? We laugh to have a good time, obviously, but it's just like when we laugh at something, and you can see this, like, you know, if you're someone who laughs at serious situations because maybe you're, you know, an emotionally avoidant, everybody raise your hands, myself included. But if you laugh in situations, it's because you're correcting the vulnerability or like the absurdity of the situation that you're in, you know what I mean? Like, and we laugh to correct the violation of an expectation that we think is going to happen, of the irony occurring like in real time. And so I think that like when we make fun of things, a lot of the time, like especially like online now, it's like, unless we, like, I always say this, it's like sometimes it feels like unless we treat an idea or a person or historical figure with like complete and utter earnestness and reverence, we're making fun of it and we're being mean. But to me, a lot of the time it's like, you know, we can just explore an idea by acknowledging certain patterns or like absurdities to it and reveal certain truths or shared experiences or shared interpretations and shared expectations of an idea, and not be making a value judgment at all.
Yeah.
But rather just be like revealing a shared truth. You know what I mean? That may be that may be universal or not. You know what I mean? But like, and that's where you get your audiences from. It's just like, who else is experiencing this expectation? You know what I mean? And so sometimes I think the more useful a lot of the times, like the breadth of what you can talk about in comedy, you know what I mean? Whether that be like interpersonal things that reveal personal politics, you know what I mean? Or like, or reveal the human condition or shared human experiences can be more useful, because they force you to examine what you expect from the people around you, what you expect from culture, what you expect from yourself. And they reveal how you see the world and force you to examine if that is inherently absurd or not. You know what I mean? Or if you can laugh at like a violation of that, like of that expectation. You know what I mean? And if you don't think it's funny, either because you don't believe it needs correcting or because, you know, that brings forward another emotional reaction from you, then you're learning about yourself and and how you experience the world otherwise. You know what I mean? So I think that's like roundabout, but that's how I would answer that question, is that it's not that one space is truer than the other, but it's kind of just like, what are, you know, I think that oftentimes to be politically engaged or to be useful in this world or to, you know, to put as much good out into the world as possible, you have to examine yourself. And sometimes like the most, and I think comedy is just better suited to that, because you come into it a lot of the times in good faith, you know what I mean? Just wanting to have a laugh, and then being exposed to certain ideas and then kind of being forced to examine your own thoughts, you know what I mean? And being exposed to communities and other people that also share those beliefs or not. And so I think sometimes that is more useful. And a lot of time you're coming to that space, you know, from a place of joy. And I think rather than like defensiveness or being like, I'm going to be told a certain thing or whatever, which is how a lot of people engage with the government or politics or oratory in a certain way. And I think that is always a better place from which to examine yourself and from which to engage with others. You know what I mean? Joy doesn't always mean you're not taking something seriously. You know what I mean? So I think that it's oftentimes like comedy can often be more useful. But if you're coming to it from a negative place, it could be the worst possible situation. You could double down on your worldview. Yeah. You know what I mean? Does that make sense as an answer?
It does.
Yay.
Michelle, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me. This was a blast. I just want to go on the record as saying I don't know shit about digital marketing. That's just a reality of like me trying to earn a living and examining that space. So if I pissed anybody off with my takes, I'm really sorry.
Fair enough. Thanks again.
Thank you.